You are now listening to On the Beat Podcast.
All right, and welcome to the On the Beat Podcast number 7 with Lou Maroto and myself, John Riddle. Good morning, Lou.
Good morning, John. Good morning.
Good morning, Jose. Jose's in the back and behind the scenes as our producer, helping us out. Today is going to be a discussion because it is September and it is National Suicide Prevention Month.
Yes.
Right? So this can be a heavy topic, okay, with people, especially in our profession.
Correct.
Okay, and in the firefighting profession, right? So, but before we get started, I want to bring our sponsors in.
Yes.
Okay. First, I'd like to thank Simpatico Real Estate and Tommy Morrison out of West Palm Beach, Florida. Palm Beach Personal Protection Group for personal protection, security, concealed firearms training, and licensing. And Riddle Defense for self-defense, combatives training, whether they be private or group training, and firearms training for beginner, intermediate, and advanced carry and concealed licensing. So with that said, as you can see by the placard on front on the table, it is National Suicide Prevention Month. Suicide and the prevention of suicide has its effects on everybody. Okay, and I'm kind of reading this, but I want to get it right. So today, in today's podcast and next week's podcast, there's going to be a discussion that we're going to have. And those that are listening right now, whether you're a firefighter, police officer, whoever you may be, if you feel you're in need of help, you're considering the act of suicide, there's always time and there's always room for you to get help. So on the placard there's a phone number. It's National Suicide Prevention Hotline of 1-800-273-TALK, TALK, or 1-800-273-8255. So if anything crosses your mind, whether it be you or family members, loved ones, or people in your circle of friends, if anything comes up in this area, please seek help. There's always light at the end of the tunnel.
Absolutely.
You know? But it's understanding the issues concerning suicide and mental health. Okay, and it's important that we learn these things because that will help us start to prevent anything that may happen in the future. Okay, we can all take action. Family members, friends, like I said, we can talk about it to each other. We can reduce access to the means of self-harm, okay, by looking into things with the person that we care about, and following up with them, also making sure, checking in on them, making sure they're okay. And these are just some of the small actions that we can do, okay, to help out. Crisis centers are critical, all right, for getting help. There's many out there, by offering immediate counseling to everybody who needs it, okay? And especially in our being cops or firefighters, even military today, we look back at this and we say, why do I need to talk to somebody? It shows a sign of weakness. And
Yep.
That's not necessarily true. You just have to be able to open yourself up and be able to sit down and pour it out. No matter how hard it may be to swallow that, it's something that you have to do. And if you can seek good counseling, it could make it a little bit easier.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think, like you said before, for the most part in the first responder profession, law enforcement officers, fire rescue, dispatchers, military, right? We as men or women, were always afraid to seek help. It's like it would belittle. We feel like it might have been a belittling action, and I think finally it's starting to become more prevalent where people are seeking help. The resources are available. Maybe 10, 20 years ago, they weren't as available as they are today. You agree?
I agree. I came on the agency in 1985, 86. And I remember incidences that took place that I was on.
Correct.
And our seeking help was at the end of shift going out and drinking some beers.
Yep.
And I came to learn quickly that at that time, the alcohol will soften you up a little bit, try to make you forget about it. But the next morning, I always woke up with a good hangover, and
the pain was
issue was still there.
Correct.
Right. So the alcohol doesn't help. Okay. It just doesn't work that way. And back then, we really didn't have anything. We really didn't have anything that we could run to or go to talk to somebody. And I'm hoping today in 2020 that law enforcement and firefighters and all of our first responder groups have something in place now.
And I'll speak for a good portion of, say Southeast Florida. Mm-hmm. From what I know, the resources are there now. We have, I think we've spoken about it before. We have a wellness officer. He's a lieutenant, and we have several officers within the department, kind of like representatives of him, that you can speak to and vent. If you're stressed out, if you have some issues, personal issues, whether it be at home or job related, there's people that you can contact nowadays within our agency to start seeking some kind of help. So it's not thrown to the side.
As it should be, right? Because, we work 12-hour shifts now.
Yes.
And we see things every day that the common person or your average citizen never sees or never wants to see. And we had that discussion the other night when we were prepping for this on our Zoom meeting about some of the things that you've seen, some of the things that I've seen, and some of the things that sometimes still wake me up at night. So but with that counseling, with that time, things will get easier. People just have to try to understand that, right? And make their way to that.
Correct. And I think we said it, it's a delicate subject. Mm-hmm. A lot of people don't like to talk about it. It was something really when I grew up, I didn't really hear my parents speaking about any experiences they had with any friends or family members that had committed that act.
Right.
So it's kind of like taboo.
Oh yeah.
But I think before we continue, let's introduce our special guest today.
Drum roll. Take it away.
Without further ado, I'd like to introduce a good friend of mine. She's friends with a lot of law enforcement officers down here in Southeast Florida. I want to introduce our friend, Tiffany Vanyo. Right? Vanyo.
Welcome, Tiffany.
Welcome, Tiff. Can you hear us good? You good?
Yeah.
Okay.
Can you hear me okay? Okay.
Yes. So, how you doing today, number one?
Good.
Good.
I really appreciate you guys bringing this to attention this week. I know it's been on my mind all week, so I appreciate that. It's just another way to spread the word right now, and I think it's a great way to reach out to people.
Now, I know when we first decided to talk about this, and I spoke to you on the phone, Tiff, like we said before, it's delicate subject matter, but you have it's more, you have a personal experience with it, and we'll tread lightly, but you want to educate and inform people about suicide, right? Again, it's Suicide Awareness Month, so we'll end up hearing your personal experience, how you're dealing with it, how you dealt with it the day of, how you're dealing with it now, and then looking at the future. How you dealing with you, not only yourself but your son also. So, Tiff. So if I can ask, tell me how you're dealing with the aftermath, because like I said before, we're not going to mention names out of respect for the family and the families involved, but I know you are, like I said before, you're willing to divulge certain information to inform and make people aware of this of suicide. So tell me your perspective tell me what your thoughts, say from the day you got a phone call that this had occurred, to your son's dad. Okay. Tell me what happened after that. Tell me what your feelings, how you began to deal with it.
Well, at first, obviously, I definitely felt like the person that called and told me had everything wrong, because never in a million years would I have thought this would happen. I never expected that call. I thought for sure that, like I said, somebody was giving me wrong information. They had the wrong guy. So once it was confirmed, obviously, I think we go through that little stage of shock and denial. I know for my son, he had told me he remembers that day being in the shower, and my parents live about 3 hours away, and he thought they got here in 5 minutes. So, he blocked out part of that day. And so everything just happened so fast.
How old was your son when this occurred?
He had just turned 12 when this happened. So, never dealt with anything like that. Had no idea what to expect for the future. Didn't know how the next day was going to be. I felt like right away there was a lot of support from you guys, and just friends. But I also recall when I went to the services and everything, I feel like I don't think I cried, because I still think I was in denial. I think I was doing my crying at nighttime when my son was laying next to me and finally falling asleep. But maybe that's when things became real. You kind of get so tied up in that moment. But it's definitely been 5.5 years of challenges because of how it's affected my son. And so what I've learned real recently is I really put myself aside, even though I've been in counseling since and still am. It's always about how to take care of my son, but not really me, So I think that's, I'll do whatever I need to do to take care of my son. But to say that this hadn't affected him, oh my gosh, I wouldn't wish the past 5.5 years on anyone that has still a child, especially one that just admired the world out of his father.
No, knowing that you got that phone call and now you're dealing with your, what I do next? Because like you said, you're at the services, right? And you're in shock. Were there any warning signs? Did you see any change in personality? Any change in his characteristics? His mannerism? Anything
Yeah,
that was giving
for
you
sure. His emotions, I would say 8 months before this happened, were all over the place. There was a day when I took a call and he was hysterically crying, which never happened in the past. He was very withdrawn. He withdrew from us, used to those daily phone calls, and then they weren't happening. And so then I would just try to stress, like, at least, reach out to your son. There was just that withdrawal, and anyone that knew him knew his son was everything to him. So for that to happen, it was definitely a warning sign. Like something's not okay. One of the things that I regret today is just, I always asked him what was going on. And he would say, it's just work. I got a lot going on at work, or, it's the girlfriend. Things aren't going right with the girlfriend. And I would just be okay with that answer. I recall so many nights laying in bed at midnight and being like, I just, like, something's just not right, So there were, I think when you really know somebody really well, that things just aren't right, especially when it came to the son, that withdrawal was just such a statement in itself. So I wish that when he said work was stressing him out, that I would have asked more questions and that I would have just keep pushing him to try to talk to me about stuff. And instead, I kind of felt I would maybe feel hurried on the phone. So I'd be like, okay, well, just, don't forget, like, life's still, we're still here and we care. But I was just okay with the answers, and I think that's something to kind of point out to people is, if somebody doesn't want to talk about something, they'll be easy to give you a quick answer. My son does it to me today. I know things that bother him, but he'll give me an answer like, it's fine, I'm fine, I don't want to talk about it. Where with him, he really would just give me an answer that was enough. I mean, who doesn't have stress with work and their significant other and things like that? So that was kind of normal. I think especially in your line of work, there's always stress. It can always be really stressful, but I didn't hear that in the years before. It was all 8 months before everything happened that all of these signs were showing. The emotions, just sad, withdrawn, depressed, crying. Never saw that from him in the past.
So as a parent, as a wife, as a husband, significant other, whatever it may be, we need to pay attention to our family, to our friends, and start observing some of those signs that you just mentioned. The withdrawing from your family and friends, the emotions, the not willing to express your feelings and stuff like that. I think it's tough. I think it's tough. It's not that easy. Easier said than done.
Yeah, definitely. Tiffany, did he ever mention anything about trying to take his life? No. Not even like in joking or anything like that? No.
No, I mean, he just, if you knew him, you knew he was larger than life. Like not that the people that actually complete suicide aren't, but you just never would have expected that from him.
And suicide can affect anyone, anywhere, at any time. It's not like you can't be affected by it. We never know. Right now you can have a great job and thank God, most of us are healthy and we have careers, etc. And then something can happen, and you have to be able to seek help if you're feeling those kind of thoughts, if you're having those kind of thoughts.
Absolutely.
Because and we spoke about it, John. We process information differently. We each have different personalities and different way of absorbing stuff that we see, from whether it's on the job or something you saw in the military. Mm-hmm. And it goes out, comes in one side and goes out the other. But when you start saving all that suffering and emotional pain that you have and withdrawing from your friends and family, at one point the thought is going to become an action, unfortunately.
So Tiffany, you're saying it was 5.5 years ago?
Yeah.
Okay. So from that day up until today, what have you done to take care of yourself? Just you.
I am currently, I see a therapist and try to work through things. I think it's healthy, even if I didn't have this going on in my life, to have somebody on the outside to talk to.
Right.
I try to do workout classes and take care of myself. I really invest in my job and I'm very dedicated to that. But if you ask my son, I just sit around and track him all the time on his phone. So, I do. I just, my main goal is to take care of my son. It's always been like that. So I feel like the things that I do for myself, I walk the dog every day. You know, I do things that are good for my mental health.
Okay.
I'm not afraid to talk about things that bother me. I'm not afraid to show my emotions if, you know, I need to. And I have a handful of friends that I can call and, you know, share those types of things with too.
So because, you know, and I always had a saying that if you have a hard time taking care of yourself, you can't take care of everybody else, right? And you do have a son. So, you know, being able to try to take care of yourself so you can get yourself kind of squared away at the moment. And I understand it's every day, you know, it's an everyday battle. And then, but being able to also not only take care of you, but take care of your son. Um, how about your son? What's he up to? What's he doing?
I mean, that's been the hardest part. If I could ever talk to somebody who was in that position where they were thinking of doing something like this, I would just tell them, like, this has been the hardest time of my life to take care of him. When I look back at when he started to withdraw from me, my son, it was the day of the services. I remember going up and trying to put my hand on his back, and he pushed my hand off. And I think he felt so just, you know, really sad, but he felt betrayed. If his own father could do something like this, even though, you know, again, he doesn't know, you know, his dad, clearly nobody's in the right state of mind when they do something like this. So it's hard to explain that to a 12-year-old. But he really just, and eventually he confessed that to me over the past year, that he was afraid that if, you know, since his dad did that, he was afraid I would do that. So he didn't want to be close to anybody. He literally put a wall up and just walked around in this little like case. He was very angry. He still goes through phases of anger. Very emotional. I think the anger has been the worst part. And when I say anger, I don't just mean screaming, yelling. I mean punching and hitting, not me, but things. You know, and I've had him in therapy too since this has happened. He currently has a mentor that he works with, but I mean, in and out of therapy programs, just trying to get him the right services. But at the end of the day, you know, if he's not going to talk now, he'll tell you anything in the world. You ask him about his dad, but to talk about that moment and what happened, he just won't do it. So, and I'm not ashamed to bring this up, but you know, I had to send my son away last year. And this is how bad it is. And this is why I'm sharing this. I hope it does help somebody to know how this affects a child. He was out of control. Like his life was spiraling, and I could see the same thing happening to him. You know, he had made suicide threats himself. We didn't know if he actually took, you know, sleeping pills, but I got woken up to, you know, the door knocking with 15 officers outside the door that there was a call that he attempted suicide. You know, it's the scariest thing in the world. I could hardly walk up the stairs. I thought I was going to pass out. So he has struggled. Like, you know, when you think about I mean, you know, a son and father's relationship, I can't replace that. You know, I've always been that nurturing person. His dad would always joke and say, it's time for you to give him the bath, you know, but when it came to everything else, that was him and his dad. So it is really affecting him. His self-esteem. I saw his confidence. I mean, he's always been an incredible athlete, my son. His whole life, I think since he was 2, he was watching sports and like just loving sports. But I saw it affected as soon as that happened. This happened right after he got out of 6th grade. So it was like 2 days after 6th grade ended. So he was getting ready to go into 7th grade. And, you know, he played football and played baseball, but I just didn't see that confidence anymore. I could see that he was just, you know, kids, and this is what I've had to learn through reading and through therapists, is that they take everything as if it was their fault. Like they weren't good enough for that person to stay here. And while we all know that that's not the truth, I mean, try to explain that to the 12-year-old, you know, so it's been really tough. You know, I still think that he's going to struggle. I have learned, I actually took him to a specialist in New York at the end of May to do some EMDR training, which I'm sure you guys might have heard about just because it's used a lot with law enforcement and military that have experienced PTSD. But the EMDR It was an intensive retreat, and he did really well. He was able to talk about that day and everything. But at the end of the day, it's just something that he's going to carry with him for a long time. And he'll probably always need to have some sort of support. But she told me that right now, my son is 17. But when you see the behaviors and the actions of him, he kind of has that emotional maturity age of 12. That's when his development is stunted at that age. So looking back into like the trauma of things, that's what, that's where he is right now. So his lack of impulse control and judgment and things like that have all stunted because of the emotional age that he is, which is 12. So a lot of research on it. I actually went through the Trauma Institute where I took him. And on top of other services that I try to provide for him, but it's still an ongoing process. This is what this suicide has and how it has affected my son's life. So it's been very hard as a mom. I'm 5'2", to stand up to my almost 6 foot, child. It's been intense, and he really just, really in the moments of anger, you just want to hug him. But I'm also here to be his parent and help him get through some things and provide that support. And I've never been so lost. So my therapy is a lot of like, guide me, like, how do I take him through this? How do I talk to him when he's really sad and he doesn't want me to come to his door? Or I go to his room and I can hear him crying, or he's in the shower and I hear him crying, because he does. I mean, it's healthy to let that out. And I do hear those things. So I'm happy that he's able to express that. But oftentimes his expression is through anger.
Well, Tiffany, let me ask you a quick question. When you send your son to that program, okay, what change? Were the other kids, were this kind of like the same age group? And were any of the kids in the program also dealing with the loss of someone?
Yes. So that program was in Utah. It was a wilderness therapy program. I seeked an educational consultant to talk about that. I had experts that helped me pick the right place for him, identify a therapist that was good with trauma. And really there was only 7 boys in his group, and most of them had all experienced a loss. I mean, I think there were maybe 2 kids in the group that were adopted and like having those challenges. But, one of the kids that Kyle really bonded with, his mom had died in a car accident with him in the car. So, not necessarily suicide, but the loss of a parent at such a young age. That program, I do feel like, was a game changer for him, as hard as it was for me, because it was during the holidays of Thanksgiving and Christmas and New Year's, and I brought him back at the beginning of the year. It was healthy that he expressed himself, because we could only communicate via letters. So he would write me letters, and the therapist would attach them to a parent portal. So it was kind of like, I could read them quickly, but it was so therapeutic, and that was like what he needed. But he also needed to be away from all the distractions here. I was worried that if I didn't send him, like I wouldn't have a senior this year. I mean, it was that bad. And so those are the things kind of behind the scenes that I don't understand, that I don't know that people really realize, I'm sure you saw, I was, and we talked and things. I struggled a lot with that, it's my only child. As a mom, you want to do everything under the sun that you can to protect them and to help them. And I still feel very helpless. I just try to always remind him, I think I was joking with you when we first started this, that I was sending him, cutting out some motivational things for his game tonight, but I send him a text message of something every night that's motivational, just to try to keep his spirits up, positive, just for him always to think that way. He always tends to think very negative. Like, his world has crashed on him so many times that he kind of moves through life that way. So that program, and then the one I sent him to in May, that was an intensive retreat. It was 3 days, and it was him one-on-one with the therapist for 8 hours a day. So I was just looking for additional support, even though I feel like he got you know, in wilderness therapy, they do therapy every day, but it was just one-on-one with the therapist once a week. So having this retreat, I felt like was something else that he really needed, but he'll probably still need more.
Okay. Have you found that through these retreats and his counseling that it's given a little bit of a breakthrough?
Did you say a breakthrough or a break for
Yes,
him?
a breakthrough for him.
Yeah, I do. I feel like he was able to be himself. He thrived when he was at Wilderness. Oh my gosh, he was able to mentor a couple new kids that came in. I got to spend one night with him and visit, and it's something, you know, it takes a lot of strength to do some of the things that even, you know, you guys do, but for a kid 16 years old to be in the wilderness and sleep on his own in the dark with no light, you know, everything they made was, you know, handmade, like cooked it over a fire, like those types of things. There was no buildings to go into. I mean, it was freezing. So I think it made him realize, you know, kind of a lot of things, you know, how lucky he was back home, you know, what I've provided for him, his life. But then also it gave him a chance to really touch into his emotions, because having a phone and the internet and all those distractions, I mean, he would never do it. You know, he would go to therapy here and either A, not participate, or B, stay on his phone, or then I would take the phone from him and then that would be an argument. So going out there, he went in the clothes that he had. I had men come in and transport him at 3 a.m. It was a very hard time. But again, you know, as you guys know, being parents, you do what you got to do. And I was looking at, I have to save my son's life. So there's a big hole in our hearts, you know, from his dad's passing. And you guys too, you never wish that upon anyone. I just never saw that coming. I know that suicide doesn't discriminate, but never in a million years, you know, would I have expected that to happen.
No, I agree with you. You're definitely a very strong woman, Tiff. Ever since I met you, you know, you've always had that, you know, the strong will to survive, to succeed, especially being a single mom, you know. And I know you've done pretty much probably everything that could be done to make sure that your son is taken care of, mentally, physically, you know, looking forward to his future, whether it be school or military. But the struggles that we were just talking about, you know, daily, that you go through. So, you know, I hope that someone who's listening hears your story, hears your pain, understands the trials and tribulations that you've had over the last 5.5 years, you know, and hopefully make a change or a difference in somebody that's possibly thinking about committing that act. You know, that there is help.
Definitely. And yeah, and Tiffany, I've never met you before until now. Okay. And just in talking to you, and not to reiterate what Lou said, but I could tell your strength. It's just in this 40 minutes of talking, I think, right now, that the strength that you have, and you know, and it comes along with support from other people, your family, and the people that you know in your friendship circle, either down here or in Ohio. But keep doing what you're doing, because you're doing good, and don't let anybody ever tell you any differently, because you're doing well. You're doing well with yourself, from what I understand, from what I hear, and with your son.
You know, and you stay in touch with certain people. You know, not only here in West Palm, but up in Ohio. You know, your parents. You know, your dad, the jarhead.
Yeah. My parents are very supportive. They've been so supportive from day one. They'll be down here. They're actually on their way now because they're coming down for senior night. They come down for every Friday night football game. You know, we're about 3 hours from each other, but I think he knows that he's walled up a lot of people, friends, you know, people that, I mean, you guys, everybody was, you know, so helpful at the beginning and reaching out and everything. And I know it's been really difficult to kind of reciprocate. I think he's really scared. I think that in his own little mind, he gets so afraid of building relationships. I see that even with girls that he dates, you know, he's like, on with the next, on, and I'm like, gosh, why don't you just try to date somebody like, you know, but I think he's afraid. He's afraid to be hurt. That pain is like, I understand that pain. So I know what he's feeling, but I want him to feel loved and know that he's loved and be able to love back. I think, you know, it's all you want for your kids is just for them to be okay. And I don't know how long I'm going to be here, but when it's my time, I would hope that, you know, I've gave him the tools to live a good life. And I hope he never thinks of that as an option. You guys, you know, probably deal with that a lot and hear of people and friends and with, you know, suicide. And it's been the worst thing in my life. I never would have expected to have to, like, this is what was planned. And sometimes when I look back, and I was angry at God for the longest time. I didn't want to go to church. I was just like so angry, like, well, if there's a God, then why would this happen? You know, and I started pulling that in all the time. But I do believe in the beginning that Kyle, my son, had a great relationship with his father because they had so many good times in the first 10 years of his life. I mean, they did so many fun things, whether it was the World Series or basketball games and, you know, like just tons of live sporting events and good things that they could do to bond together. And in hindsight, it was God's way of giving him the most time with his dad before this was supposed to happen, I guess. So I look at it a little bit differently now. I know that I'm not in control. For the longest time, I tried to really, like, I'm still a helicopter parent. I probably always will be. You know, I've got trackers on the phone and on the car, and I'm so afraid, you know, if he leaves to go somewhere now that he's driving and I hear sirens, which we don't hear them often around where I live, but if I hear them, I'm calling my son on the phone. If he doesn't answer, I'm obsessively calling him. So I get very afraid. You know, I have some of that PTSD as well. That's what I was doing the day that everything happens with my son's father. I was calling him, calling, and calling. So it brings up a lot of memories, but it's just very scary. You just never know, you know, that last time. So I hope that anyone listening, like, I feel like it's, you know, you've heard this several times, is that the pain that they're experiencing, it goes away, but then it gets passed on to us left behind. And it's a hard life. It's really hard to walk through that and grieve someone that you just really care about and know that I'm not going to ever see him again.
That's it's definitely, I don't know, for lack of a better statement or word, it's definitely tough to swallow, you know, like trying to deal with the aftermath, you know, trying to pick up the pieces, especially with a young child, you know. But like I said before, you're amazing, Tiff. Keep doing what you're doing, you know. It's always, don't keep your emotions and always share them with somebody else, you know, so you can vent.
Definitely.
You know, because
that's what it boils down to, right? The same as going with people who have those thoughts to seek help. Got to keep that open mind, keep positive.
You know, and just real quick, like sometimes people think that, you know, any first responder might be a little bit stronger than the regular civilian, but when that hits and affects your family, it's the same thing, you know. Because I've seen it on the law enforcement side, and I've seen it on the civilian side. You know, yeah, we might get a little desensitized to it because we go to those calls, right? But we go to the call and then we don't see what that family has to deal with after the fact, right? we go on to the next call and the next call and the next call. But sooner or later, for some of our men and women in law enforcement or first responders, that starts to catch up also. And, it may start with, alcohol, abuse, but eventually you got to vent that stuff out. You got to seek help. And thank God our agencies, or I know my agency again has it, the person that you can reach out to, and start the process of some type of healing.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, it's with the times, everything has to change, and there was a pattern. We're noticing that it's not only affecting the military, it's affecting first responders.
Yeah, and like we spoke yesterday, we're starting to see more and more of it popping up.
Yeah,
with first responders.
Oh.
And like you said, it's the things we go to daily on our with our job. We see it. Yeah, after a period of time, we get desensitized, and we move on. And sometimes, every once in a while, it might scratch you in the back of the head.
You don't
come
forget
around
it
again. You don't really forget it. But then when it hits home in our own family, that's when we get that wow, that wake up call, of holy shit, this is something that's just happened, that's really reaching out and touching me, and it affects us even more, to the point of sometimes if it's a buddy and it affects us enough, now we got to go find somebody to talk to.
And that's probably the biggest hurdle, is taking that first step.
Yeah, because we don't do that.
Right.
We're not supposed to do that.
So
it's such the complete opposite.
But that's why we have Tiff here today, to give us her personal experience. And you have to reach out. It's wives, husbands, siblings, family members, start noticing those warning signs. It doesn't make you at fault, because we're not just staring at our siblings every day, and we're watching. But if you start to hear something, out of normal, we got to ask those questions, like, you doing okay? Can I help you with anything?
And sometimes we have to pry a little deeper.
Yeah.
Even though they may not like it, we may not like it. Sometimes we just may have to pry a little bit deeper, because we know there's something just not right there. And we got to figure out what it is. It might get offensive to some. It might get offensive to some of them, to some people, because we're digging in. But the outcome is what we're looking for at the end of the day, and they'll get over that.
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah. But Tiff, you have a great, a very personal story. I want to thank you for expressing your story, and a lot of people, I think a lot of people wouldn't take that step to come on and share your personal experience, but you definitely are genuine. You're trying to make a change in somebody else's life, and if we can touch one person by your story, I hope we can touch 1,000 people, 1,000,000 people, because I don't think it can get any tougher than what you've been through. The mom, single, different state, having to travel and all that stuff. So kudos to you, and I always have your back. You can call me or wifey anytime.
I appreciate it, for sure.
And you have a lot of guys down here and ladies that personally, that I'm sure will always be willing to listen to you. When if you have the feel to vent.
But coming on too could be, when people come out and they want to talk about what had happened, could be part of the healing process also. You know, being able to vent it, being able to give out information to stop that next person from doing something, that can be part of your healing process.
Well, I wish you nothing but the best, Tiff.
Absolutely.
Thank you again on behalf of John and I for coming on. Thank you for taking time. I know you're busy and you got other plans today. But no, seriously, thank you very much. From Florida to Ohio, we send a lot of love and hugs.
Thank you so much. And we've been feeling it, so I appreciate it. And thanks so much for bringing this out and, you know, making awareness too this week for suicide awareness. Appreciate it. You guys are doing great things. Appreciate it.
Great. Well, thanks for coming on, Tiffany. We appreciate it. It was great seeing you.
Thank you, Tiff.
Right.
Okay.
Have a great day.
Take care.
Bye.